Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. You know, this is an unprecedented time in human history. It's unprecedented in the fact that we've went through a tremendous, the long credit cycle. Many years now of credit expansion has over-leveraged the system. The way the system was set up back around 1914 with the Central Bank of the United States, which is the biggest of the central banks, the way the system was originally set up, it was set up for continuous debt expansion. Every dollar that they create has debt attached to it. It accrues interest, but they do not create the money to pay off the interest. So what happens if the debt is if you try to pay the debt back, the money has not been created to pay all the debt plus interest. So what you're left with is more than zero money. None. So money is debt. And what's happened is the system is completely over-leveraged. What that basically means is they've created and they've expanded the monetary supply out to where it has to contract. So when it tries to contract, they expand it further. And what this is it's a giant, enormous Ponzi scheme. Basically what it amounts to, getting down to the basics of it. And like every Ponzi scheme, it has to continue to expand. Let me explain to you something to give you an idea what this is like. When I lived back in Florida years ago, they came up with a Ponzi scheme that was very successful. It was called red worms. So, earthworms, about every month, they double their population if you feed them. You can feed them any old garbage you want. So there's these guys that get down there and they ran a Ponzi scheme and they didn't tell anybody what they were doing. They put on a big front like it's a big business, like they had all kinds of sales for earthworms, a big market for earthworms. Wasn't a big market at all. What they were basically doing is they were raising earthworms and they would sell you a kit. So you buy the kit off of them. Back then it was for $1,000 to buy the kit. And then they would give you a contract that they would buy all the earthworms that you could raise if you bought this kit, right? For like $1,000. It's a lot of money back then. This was way back in the early 1980s. $1,000 was like $10,000 now. So you buy this kit, they give you the contract, and then you sell the earthworms back to them for like $5 a pound, right? So what happened was the first people that bought the kit, they started making worms, making earthworms, and worms doubled every so many days. I forget what it was, either every 2 weeks or every month. They'd double their numbers, and they'd sell them back to these people, and they made money like bandits because $5 a pound didn't take them long to make their $1,000 back and more. So they told all their friends, hey, this is a great business. And of course they grew the business. They made it look great, like they got all kinds of sales. Earthworms are the greatest thing ever. We got fishing, we can sell them for fishing, we can sell them to landfills, and all this promotion. But underneath it all, it was a Ponzi scheme. Ultimately, in the end, it got to the point where they had more contracts out there then they could. What they were doing was when people would fulfill their contract and sell the earthworms back for $5, they would make a new kit and sell it to somebody else. They would buy the earthworms back, but they were using them to make a new kit to sell to somebody else. After a while, there were so many kits coming in, right? And and so many earthworms coming in from the contracts that they couldn't sell them all in kits. Then they would fold up and run with the money. And this was a giant Ponzi scheme. Like all Ponzi schemes, they grow exponentially, bigger and bigger and bigger, until in the end you just can't satisfy it. That's what's happening here. This is a giant monetary Ponzi scheme that the central banks are running. And they have to constantly keep expanding that monetary base. If it starts to shrink back, well, it spirals out of control. The Ponzi scheme starts to end. What we're looking at here is they've got roughly one more pulse left. In other words, they're to the point now, like the earthworm dealer was, when he could still just barely manage to take in all the worms and buy all the worms and make enough kits to just barely turn it over. He knew that the next month he wouldn't be able to, and he knew he'd have to run away and leave town the next month. He knew this month, he said, I can just barely handle it now, and it's getting too big for me, and it's going to fold next month. That's where the Fed is right now. The Fed can barely handle it. They can handle it now. They can handle this next pulse. See, the last pulse was 2008. They handled it pretty easily. And they're going to be able to handle this one too, by expanding the monetary base. But this time they're going to have to, just like the earthworm guy, on the second pulse back, it was easier for him. On the last pulse, it got really hard because there's so many worms coming in. It got really hard. And he knew the next following month, he knew he couldn't do it. There'd be just too many worms coming in on these contracts. So he knew this was the last month, but he didn't tell anybody. He knew he was going to skip town on the next pulse. He'd handle this pulse. That's where the Fed is right now. They can still handle one more. They've got their interest rates up high enough, 2.5% or something like that. They didn't get to normalize them, but they got their interest rates high enough, and they can inject enough money in the system to handle one more. That's where we are right now with the system. The system's going to fold. It's going to have to be reset. Now, everybody talks about the reset coming. They'll say, oh, there's going to be a reset. But they don't say what. Into what? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think the reset's going to be into. We've got these new currencies. Now, this Ponzi scheme currency that we got going, called the Federal Reserve Note, which is like the earthworm business. It'll keep expanding until it finally breaks. This Ponzi scheme currency is not going to be where it finally goes, because it's inflationary, highly inflationary, and it's only a matter of time at this point before people start to realize, hey, you know what? See, after this next pulse, people are going to start to realize, hey, you know what? Prices are going up enormously fast. I better get my money out of the bank and buy something of value, because if I don't, my dollars aren't going to be worth anything. And people actually start to buy, and prices start to go up faster and faster and faster, because people lose confidence in the purchasing power of the money. We're not there yet. But in order for them to fulfill these contracts, just like the earthworm business, this next pulse coming in, they're going to have to create so much money that they're going to create that sort of inflation that leads to hyperinflation. Where we're ultimately going on all of this at some point in the future is this is a crisis in government. That's where it's going, ultimately. Government has one last maneuver that they can make to maintain power. They're going to have to socialize programs and distribute helicopter money. This is only going to intensify the hyperinflation. They're going to have to, though. They're forced into a corner. They cannot let it spiral into deflation, because deflation is a self-feeding, perpetuating cycle. And that's the natural inclination of the system, is to go into deflation. Now, I was talking about these currencies. We have a deflationary currency out there. For the first time in ages. If you put a deflationary currency up against an inflationary currency, it's almost like matter and antimatter coming together. Boom! Bow! Right? You ever watch Star Trek? You know, what happens when antimatter meets matter? Boom! The cryptocurrencies are a new thing out there, but they're very, extremely deflationary. This is why you see them constantly going up in price. So their purchasing power is constantly going up, while the paper currencies, the fiat currencies, are inflationary, and you see their purchasing power going down in the opposite direction. This is a cycle that's happening too. So these cryptocurrencies are positioning themselves almost like if you got a firefighters, and they're outside a building, and they got this big net, and they're running around with a net, and the big fat woman's up on top, or a big fat man's up on top of the... Maybe I shouldn't pick on fat people. Okay, I won't pick on fat people. But you got the guy, he's up there on top of the building, and he's going to be jumping. And they're trying to position the net in the right spot to catch him. That's what they're doing. That's what these cryptocurrencies are doing. They're positioning themselves as a group, not as a single cryptocurrency like Bitcoin by itself, although Bitcoin does represent half, so it's the biggest part of the net. But all of them are working together in unison. They're positioning themselves within the financial system. To catch what? They're going to catch what is going to fall from the dollar. In other words, the value. It's what they're positioning themselves for. If it wasn't for this fiat Ponzi scheme, worldwide fiat Ponzi scheme, these cryptocurrencies would have no success or no utilitarian purpose whatsoever. They would just die, wither away and die. They'd just disappear. But they're acting like, because they're deflationary, they're like the antimatter. They're like positioning themselves to accept all of the value out of the dollar. And the government is pushing it this way. Because the government, in order to keep the system running, to keep everything going, is going to have to print more dollars and more dollars and more dollars. This is an endless process. They can't stop it. It's the final days of a giant, enormous Ponzi scheme coming to a close. And this is going to lead to tremendous upheaval in the world. And it's going to lead to the government's last hope to maintain power, because it's money. It's money that maintains governments on the earth. They have to run on money. And the governments are actually all going broke right now. Even though they're spending enormous amounts of money, they're taking enormous amounts of money in, they're still going broke, and they're becoming more and more hungry. They're like a hungry wolf. This is why they've got all the police. If you've ever noticed the police lately, the police are on high alert to look for any little thing. Oh, he didn't turn on his turn signals. Grab him! Oh, their eyes are just going like this steady as they roam around the streets, You make one little mistake. No turn signals, or you didn't quite come to a full stop, or this is because they're broke. They're using these tickets as a method of paying the salaries of the police forces. Not fixing any of our potholes on the highways. And the garbage, this whole big thing about the garbage, they only take certain bags on certain days, and you got to use a certain color bags and all this kind of stuff. And if there's a tin can in your bag, you leave it on the side of the road and all this kind of stuff. This is all because they know that they're not going to have to do as much garbage collection if they do it. When they take it to the dump, for crying out loud, they probably all dump it right in the same heap. The blue bags, the white bags, the black bag, all of it. And scoop it up with a big bulldozer anyway and push it into the ground just the way they used to. But they make you go through all this sorting garbage. Why? Is because they're out of money, and they've done the math on this, and they know that the people have to go through all this headache. There's a certain amount of people that just won't bother going through all this sorting business, sorting through their garbage. They've done the demographics on it already, and they know it's cheaper that way. Everything, they're trying to cut corners on everything in society because the governments are running out of money. They're looking for money. They're scrounging for it. And it's going to get worse. Until right now, the governments have a certain mentality. It's like, maybe we should try to cut back a little bit because our debt's going too high. Oh, we'll cut this program. We'll cut that program. That's all going to end. At a certain point, when the debt hits a certain point, They're almost like a guy with a credit card, you know, and he owes a lot on his credit card, and he's out there with his wife, and he's like, don't buy that that ice cream sundae this weekend, Martha, because my credit card's getting kind of high. But after it gets to a certain point, he's like, the hell with it. Go ahead and order the lobster and steak. I don't care anymore. You know, that's how he gets after a while. That's what the governments are like. That's what's going to happen to them. Right now, they're all concerned, oh, the debt's getting too high. The debt's getting too high. What they don't realize is this debt's exponential, and it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to grow. So we might as well splurge, because we're on a sinking Titanic, folks. Quite honestly, we are on a sinking Titanic. So what's going to float the Titanic again? The cryptocurrencies are positioning themselves to float the boat. But here's the thing. What about gold and silver in all of this? The maniacal governments that we have right now are using the central bank and using the banks under the central bank, and they're using, you'll never be able to pin it to them, but they are manipulating the price of gold and silver downwards because they know that the dollar would practically immediately go into hyperinflation if they didn't. And this manipulation will continue. So basically, it's like they've taken, say gold is one guy, and say they look like Laurel and Hardy. You ever seen Laurel and Hardy? Or Abbott and Costello? You know? That's gold and silver. They've locked them up in a jail cell, and they ain't getting out. They've thrown away the key. They're not going to be able to go up. So they can't do the job that they should be doing. The job they should be doing is the same role that the cryptocurrencies are positioning themselves for. But they're locked up in jail. And they can't get out. The government won't let them out. Not until they're forced to. Ultimately, in the end, they're going to break out of jail. You know, ultimately, in the end, gold and silver are going to break out of jail in the end. But it's only going to be a long ways into this. By the time they break out of jail, cryptocurrencies could be how high? Because they've taken advantage of this situation. To be quite honest. Because gold and silver, they're in the jail cell. They're not going nowhere. Anyway, the world right now is in such an unusual situation, and they're fighting over the oil. What can I say? Let's talk Venezuela. What's going on in Venezuela? Well, you know, they got a lot of crude oil in Venezuela, you know, and Russia's got their eyes on it. Russia's doing deals with Maduro. All kinds of military deals and everything else, and they're in there. Russia's got their foot right square in the door. Well, the United States, they're heading down there too. They're steaming down there. And it looks like, you ever heard of the old Western movie called A Showdown at the OK Corral? This is what's going on, quite seriously, in Venezuela right now while we speak. Russia has no plans on leaving. And they got no plans on leaving Maduro hanging in the wind either. You know, the leader of Venezuela. So we got that going on. Well, what about North Korea right now? You know, we got they've pulled the wool over our eyes, but big, with all this peace talk that went on for about the last 8 months or so. You know, and going over and hugging and shaking hands with the South Korean leader and the North Korean leader and all this peace and everything else, right? That was all to buy time. They had the nuclear production in high gear. The wheels just spinning in their factories during those months. You know? Now it might be too late. Hate to say it, but it might be too late. And so what is he doing? He's back into being Rocket Man again. Okay, so but at this point in time, you might not be able to touch him anymore. Seriously. Because he bought the time he needed. It was all a ruse to buy time. That's why the deal fell through in the end, because it's all a ruse. It was a ruse. We've been played but good. Now, you got other hot spots. Ukraine. New leader in Ukraine, you know. We got to wait and see what he's going to do. But, you know, Vladimir Putin has offered all of the people that live over there near the border, basically he's offered them a get out of jail free card. You know, he's offered them this passport business that they can come right into Russia. You know, we'll welcome you in with open. That's not going over very good, I guess. So we got a very strange little situation going on. Oh, and what about the Brexit? Hasn't went away, guys. All they're doing is stalling. It's going to come around again. And it's already like a month's been by now already. So they only got like 5 months left. 5 months and change left. The clock's ticking. You know, and we're going to come right back around to this again. Do you know the uproar that's going to come this next time if they try to go for another extension? Need I say more? So we're not paying any attention to that. We've got a strange brew going on in the world right now. There's like a little bit of a calm before the storm. Italy's leaders are consolidating. You know? Italy is totally broke. And, you know, if it wasn't for $41 billion of bond purchases that the European Central Bank made not long ago. Now, how long do you think that's going to last Italy, that $41 billion? I figure about 3 months, and I figure a month's passed already on that deal, that little deal. You know, it's a lot harder to support Italy than it is to support Greece. Greece doesn't require as much, but they've been supporting these two countries basically to try to hold the euro together. The whole world is falling apart at the seams. Canada. Oil industry here in Canada. It's falling apart right now. I was reading an article this afternoon that one big oil company is just basically going under. And they say like there's 10 more that's ready to fall. You know, and this is a big part. Now see, one of the reasons it's kept the United States and held it together is the fracking industry. And America has become an oil producing country now. And if you don't believe that that's significant, just take a look at what built Dubai, what built the area of the world that used to be the Persian Empire. What built that region was oil. This is why these oil-rich countries are rich. This is why they drive Lambos and they drive Mercedes and Bentleys. You know, is because of oil. This is an oil-based economy. So, because America has become the major oil producer, again, well, it's staved off this, and it's kept the economy, it's helped to keep the economy going. It's a large contributing factor to the United States economy. But, let's analyze it a little bit. There's a problem with oil fracking. It's not like the original wells. You remember when they used to come in there years ago, like in the early 1900s or whatever, you know, 1940s or whatever, and they'd dig an oil well, a new oil well, and the oil would come gushing up out of the ground, and it would rain down on everybody. We've hit oil, like Jed Clampett, you know, on the Beverly Hillbillies. He shot his gun into the ground, and an oil comes springing out, and he was a millionaire. That's how it used to be when all those big reserves of oil were in there. Well, they went in there and pumped all those out. And they closed the wells down because there wasn't any more oil down in there. Until fracking came along. Basically, all they're doing is they're steaming the residue. It's almost like you guys, if you were to make fudge, you know, make a pot of fudge, and you pour the fudge into the container, you know, you cut it into squares and stuff. There's some left in the pot. Well, that's the way with the oil. Originally, there's a big pool of oil. They took it out, like taking the fudge out, and there's a little bit left in the pot or left down in the ground. They're just squeezing that last little bit out with fracking. How long do you really think that's going to last? That's non-sustainable. They have to keep going and chasing these wells. The wells tap out and they have to dig more, and in the end it becomes a losing proposition because the fracking wells, the new ones that they have to dig, are a little bit deeper. They require a little bit more pressure. They require a little bit more energy to get the oil out, so the oil's priced higher on the market. This is where fracking's going ultimately in the end. They got huge reserves out in West Texas in the Permian oil basin, but it's oil that's going to cost more. It's next generation oil. It's going to cost more. It's deeper. Requires more pressure, more, and also the price of everything's going up. Everything across the board. These guys are no different than us. These guys that dig oil wells, they still have to go to the hardware store and buy nuts and bolts for their pipes and everything else. A new hard hat, whatever else they need. You know, like last year the hard hat was $8.99. This year it's $19.99. You know? And they have to pass that cost on to the price per barrel. It's simple math. So, you know, and oil prices right now are being pumped up, whereas gold and silver are being suppressed down. We live in a topsy-turvy world. You got your stock market that goes up on bad news and goes down on good news. Everything's upside down right now. The markets are they're trying to control the markets. And they do have a certain amount of power at controlling the markets. Now, these people out there who say, oh, the markets are all 100% controlled, I don't believe it. Markets ultimately in the end will find fair market value. I don't care if they got the controls in there. I don't care. The market will find fair market value in the end. It'll bust through the controls that they have. It'll smash them to smithereens. They tried to control the market back in the 1929 stock market crash, and they were successful for, I think, a couple days. And they had to dump massive amounts of money in to do it. And sure, the plunge protection teams out there and all this stuff that they've got in place, you know, but ultimately in the end, if that market wants to roll over and roll over hard, it's going to. It'll bust straight through their controls. Ultimately. The only ones that can really control the market is the Fed. They're the only ones that can really stop a market crash. But they can only do it after the fact. And then they got to come in with copious amounts of monetary stimulus, and then it takes a couple months for it to take effect before it really starts to roll in there, the new money and money creation in there, and starts to actually prop the market back up again. They have to basically come in after the market hits rock bottom. In other words, finds fair market value. And then they can start pumping it back up with funny money again. This is what they're going to do. I mean, we're headed towards something nasty this way comes, and it's not too far in our future. You got to stay prepared, guys. Something really nasty is coming. And ultimately, I believe it's going to lead to the rise of cryptocurrencies. And ultimately, in the end, I believe gold and silver are going to break free from that jail. And the price is going to be astoundingly how high they go, because they're deflationary too. Whatever's deflationary out there against inflationary assets, it's almost like kryptonite to Superman. You know, I mean, that's the way deflationary things act toward inflationary assets. It's like good money pushes out bad, sort of thing. Like in the Roman Empire, they used to take the coins and used to scrape the silver off of them. And then sell the coin for the face value the coin was worth. And they did the same thing in 1964 with the American coins. They used to pick out all the white-looking ones. Those were the silver ones. And put them away. You know? That means that the bad money finds its way into the system. The good money is stored away. Well, what do you think's happening with Bitcoin? It's called HODL, hold on for dear life. People are buying up Bitcoins, and they're putting them away. It's just like when they were picking out these silver coins and putting them away. It's the same deal. And they would do the same thing with gold and silver if it wasn't for the price suppression. Price suppression is making people wary of buying gold and silver. Because every day they go on there, all of a sudden they see it smack down, and they see their investment hurt. And so they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to buy that, because I saw it get smacked down. It's lower than it was a month ago or 2 months ago. You know, it's lower in price, and things are going down in price. People don't want them. But cryptocurrency, it's gathering steam. That's because gold and silver are in jail. Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye for now.